It's hard to imagine a time when Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't a household name. For millions, he was the ultimate action hero, the muscles from Brussels. The man who could do the splits between two chairs, the star who brought martial arts to the big screen with a blend of grace, power, and undeniable charisma. But behind the high kicks and Hollywood lights, there was a story few people knew. A story of struggle, ambition, and a single moment that would change everything. This is the untold truth of how Jean-Claude Van Damme's career ended immediately after one fateful decision. A story of meteoric rise, devastating fall, and the dark secrets that Hollywood tried to keep hidden. Jean-Claude Van Damme was born on October 18, 1960, in a quiet suburb of Brussels, Belgium. His real name was Jean-Claude Camille François van Varenberg, and his early life was anything but glamorous. His father, Eugene, worked as both an accountant and a florist, while his mother, Eliana, juggled the demands of a bilingual household. Jean-Claude grew up speaking both French and Dutch, a skill that would later help him navigate the international world of film. But as a child, he was shy, skinny, and wore thick glasses, an easy target for bullies. He wasn't the tough guy he would later become. In fact, he was more interested in comic books and quiet hobbies than sports or fighting. But everything changed when his father decided that Jean-Claude needed to toughen up. At age 11, he started lifting weights, determined to transform his body and his life. The gym became his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the taunts and find a sense of control. By age 12, he was enrolled in karate classes under the strict guidance of Claude Getz, a coach who believed in discipline above all else. The training was brutal. Jean-Claude broke his nose more than once, but he kept coming back, driven by a desire to prove himself. By 16, he had earned a spot on Belgium's national karate team, a remarkable achievement for a boy who had once been bullied for being weak. But martial arts wasn't his only secret weapon. Around the same time, Jean-Claude began taking ballet lessons, training 5 days a week in secret. He knew his karate friends would laugh if they found out, but ballet gave him balance, grace, and the body control that would later make his fight scenes legendary. He would later say that ballet was the hardest training he ever did, even tougher than martial arts. It was this unique combination of strength and elegance that set him apart from every other action star. By the late 1970s, Jean-Claude was making a name for himself in the European karate circuit. He racked up 44 wins and only 4 losses in semi-contact matches, and in 1979, at just 19 years old, he won the European Professional Karate Association's middleweight championship. But despite his success in the ring, he struggled to make ends meet. He opened a small gym in Brussels, but it barely paid the bills. To survive, he delivered pizzas, laid carpets, and even did some modeling for muscle magazines. He often slept in the gym to save money, dreaming of a bigger life, one that could only be found in America. In 1982, at age 21, Jean-Claude made the boldest move of his life. He packed his bags and flew to Los Angeles, arriving with little more than a few $100s and a head full of dreams. He didn't speak English, had no acting experience, and knew no one in Hollywood. He lived in his car near Venice Beach, showered in public bathrooms, and took whatever odd jobs he could find, cleaning apartments, waiting tables, delivering pizzas. He even worked as a limo driver, where a chance encounter with Chuck Norris would change his fortunes forever. Norris gave him a shot at stunt work, and soon Jean-Claude was appearing in the background of low-budget films, slowly building a reputation for his athleticism and intensity. But Hollywood is a city built on dreams and nightmares. For every success story, there are 1,000 tales of heartbreak and failure. Jean-Claude's journey was just beginning, but the seeds of his eventual downfall were already being sown. The pressures of fame, the temptations of excess, and the relentless grind of the industry would soon collide in a way that no one could have predicted. Jean-Claude's first real break came in 1986, when he landed a small but memorable role as the villain in No Retreat, No Surrender. He was paid just $250, but his intensity on screen was impossible to ignore. He hit his co-stars for real during fight scenes, earning a reputation for being both dedicated and a little bit dangerous. But it was his next move that would change his life forever. While working as a waiter in a Los Angeles restaurant, Jean-Claude spotted producer Menahem Golan, the head of Canon Films, eating dinner. Seizing the moment, Jean-Claude performed a perfect roundhouse kick while holding a bowl of soup. Golan was so impressed that he invited him to audition the very next day. Jean-Claude showed up, took off his shirt, and performed high kicks over the producer's head. Golan was stunned. He handed Jean-Claude a script and said, "Next week in Hong Kong." That script was for Bloodsport. Bloodsport was filmed on a shoestring budget, with Jean-Claude doing all his own stunts, no safety gear, no doubles, just raw athleticism and determination. He performed the splits on kitchen counters, executed every kick himself, and even helped re-edit the fight scenes to make them more dynamic. When the film finally hit theaters in 1988, it was an unexpected smash, grossing over $50 million worldwide. Overnight, Jean-Claude Van Damme became a global star. He wasn't just another action hero, he was a phenomenon. His unique blend of martial arts skill, physical charisma, and underdog story resonated with audiences everywhere. But with fame came new pressures. Hollywood is a place where success can be as dangerous as failure. The studios wanted more, the fans wanted bigger stunts, and Jean-Claude felt the weight of expectation growing heavier with each new project. In 1989, he starred in Kickboxer, a film that would cement his status as an action icon. Shot in Thailand, the movie introduced Muay Thai to Western audiences and featured one of the most memorable scenes in action movie history. Jean-Claude, shirtless and wild, dancing drunkenly in a Bangkok bar before launching into a brutal fight. The film was a hit, earning $50 million on a modest budget and turning Van Damme into a household name. The hits kept coming. Cyborg, Lionheart, Death Warrant, and Double Impact all followed in rapid succession, each one showcasing Jean-Claude's physical prowess and growing confidence as an actor. He played twin brothers in Double Impact, using split-screen tricks and real twin stand-ins to pull off the illusion, a technical feat that proved he was more than just a fighter. By 1992, he had reached the pinnacle of his career with Universal Soldier, a big-budget sci-fi action film that paired him with Dolph Lundgren. The movie was a box office success, but behind the scenes, things were starting to unravel. The demands of stardom were taking their toll. Jean-Claude began to develop a reputation for being difficult on set. He demanded special treatment, insisted on rewriting fight scenes to showcase his signature moves, and clashed with directors and co-stars. His ego was growing, and so were the rumors about his personal life. He was seen partying late into the night, missing call times, and showing up to work looking exhausted. The pressure to maintain his image as the ultimate action hero was immense, and Jean-Claude began to rely on substances to cope. It started innocently enough, just a few drinks to unwind after a long day of filming. But soon, alcohol wasn't enough. The Hollywood party scene was notorious for its excess, and Jean-Claude found himself drawn into a world of late-night clubs, endless celebrations, and easy access to drugs. Cocaine became his drug of choice, and it wasn't long before his habits spiraled out of control. At the height of his addiction, he was reportedly spending $10,000 a week on cocaine, disappearing for days at a time, and missing entire shoots. Directors had to hire handlers just to keep track of him, and his erratic behavior became the stuff of legend. But even as his personal life was falling apart, Jean-Claude continued to deliver on screen. In 1994, he starred in Time Cop, his biggest hit yet, earning over $100 million worldwide. He was paid $3 million for the role, and the film's success seemed to cement his place in Hollywood's A-list. But beneath the surface, the cracks were beginning to show. The combination of fame, addiction, and mounting pressure was pushing Jean-Claude to the brink, and the moment that would end his career was drawing closer with every passing day. The year 1994 should have been the peak of Jean-Claude Van Damme's career. Time Cop was a box office sensation, and Hollywood was ready to hand him the keys to the kingdom. Universal Pictures offered him a staggering $36 million for trilogy. $36 million for trilogy, $12 million per film. It was the kind of offer that could have secured his future and cemented his legacy as one of the greats. But Jean-Claude, riding high on a wave of success and ego, made a decision that would haunt him forever. He turned down the deal, demanding $20 million per movie, convinced he deserved the same pay as Jim Carrey, who was then Hollywood's hottest comedy star. The studio executives didn't negotiate. They laughed, hung up the phone, and just like that, Jean-Claude Van Damme was blacklisted overnight, IT was a stunning fall from grace. Just a few years earlier, he had been making $75,000 for films like Death Warrant. By 1994, he was commanding $8 million for Street Fighter. But the $20 million gamble was a step too far. Hollywood is a town that rewards confidence but punishes hubris, and Jean-Claude's demand was seen as an unforgivable act of arrogance. The offers dried up almost instantly. Producers who once clamored for his attention now avoided his calls. The studios moved on to the next big thing, leaving Jean-Claude to wonder where it all went wrong. But the truth is, the seeds of his downfall had been planted long before that fateful phone call. His cocaine addiction was spiraling out of control. On the set of Street Fighter, he was using around 10 grams a day, costing him $10,000 a week. He would disappear from set, miss entire shooting days, and show up unable to function. The studio had to assign him a handler, but instead of keeping him in line, the handler partied with him, bringing champagne to the set and enabling his worst impulses. By the time he was filming Double Team in 1996, Jean-Claude was hallucinating, barely able to keep it together. He checked into rehab but walked out after just 7 days. Unable to face life without drugs, Hollywood began to turn on him. Directors and producers whispered about his unreliability, his mood swings, and his unpredictable behavior. He earned a new nickname, Jean-Claude Van Damme. The action hero who had once seemed invincible was now a liability, a risk no studio wanted to take. His marriage to bodybuilder Gladys Portugues was crumbling under the weight of his addiction and erratic moods. He lashed out at those closest to him, demanded outrageous salaries, and self-medicated with more and more cocaine. The man who had once been the embodiment of discipline and determination was now lost in a haze of drugs and self-destruction that in 1998, everything came crashing down. After a failed suicide attempt, Jean-Claude was finally diagnosed with rapid cycling bipolar disorder. The diagnosis explained the years of manic highs and crushing lows, the bursts of creativity followed by periods of deep depression. For years, he had tried to outrun his demons, but now they had caught up with him. He began taking mood stabilizers and, for the first time, spoke openly about his struggles. In a raw and emotional interview with Oprah in 2007, he broke down in tears, confessing to the world the pain he had been hiding for so long. But by then, the damage to his career was done. The offers had dried up, the studios had moved on, and Jean-Claude was left to pick up the pieces of a life that had once seemed unstoppable. He tried to stage a comeback with smaller roles and direct-to-video releases, but the magic was gone. The action hero who had once ruled the box office was now a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly Hollywood can turn on its own. Yet, even in the darkest moments, Jean-Claude refused to give up. He continued to train, using martial arts as a form of therapy. He shared his story with anyone who would listen, hoping that his struggles might help others avoid the same fate. But the shadow of his past loomed large, and the industry that had once embraced him now kept him at arm's length. The moment that ended his career wasn't just a single decision or a single scandal. It was the culmination of years of pressure, addiction, and unchecked ambition. And for Jean-Claude Van Damme, the fight was far from over. As the 1990s faded into the new millennium, Jean-Claude Van Damme's world looked nothing like the one he had conquered just a decade before. The action movie landscape was changing. New stars were rising, special effects were taking center stage, and the gritty, physical style that had made Van Damme famous was suddenly out of fashion. Studios were investing in franchises and superheroes, not the lone wolf martial artists who had once ruled the box office. For Jean-Claude, every new project felt like a battle to prove he still belonged, that he tried to reinvent himself, taking on roles that poked fun at his own image. In 2008, he starred in JCVD, a metadrama where he played a fictionalized version of himself, a washed-up action star caught in a real-life hostage situation. The film was raw, self-aware, and deeply personal. There's an 8-minute monologue where Van Damme breaks down, confessing his regrets, his addictions, and his failures. Critics praised his vulnerability, calling it the best performance of his career. But audiences, used to seeing him as an invincible hero, weren't ready for this new, broken version of Van Damme. The film flopped at the box office, and Hollywood's doors remained closed. Still, he refused to disappear. He took on voice roles in animated hits like Kung Fu Panda 2 and Minions: The Rise of Gru, finding a new audience among younger viewers who had never seen his classic films. He launched a YouTube channel, Train with Van Damme, sharing fitness tips and home workout routines, determined to inspire others to find strength through discipline. Martial arts became his therapy, a way to manage his bipolar disorder and keep his demons at bay. He trained every day, not for the cameras, but for himself. But the past was never far behind. The tabloids continued to hound him, dredging up old scandals and new rumors. In 2012, he landed a role in The Expendables 2, playing the villain opposite Sylvester Stallone. It was a chance to rejoin the big leagues, but even here, the ghosts of his reputation lingered. When he tried to join the Fast and Furious franchise, Vin Diesel reportedly blocked him, saying, "No, I don't want him." The message was clear: Hollywood had moved on. Yet, Van Damme's story was never just about the movies. It was about survival. In 2016, he starred in Jean-Claude Van Damme, an Amazon series where he played a parody of himself, a has-been action star who moonlights as a secret agent. The show was clever, self-deprecating, and surprisingly heartfelt. It only lasted 6 episodes, but it showed a side of Van Damme that few had seen before: a man willing to laugh at his own legend, to own his mistakes, and to keep fighting even when the world had written him off. In 2024, he returned once more in Darkness of Man, playing a former Interpol agent trying to protect a child from gangs. The film, which co-starred his real-life son, was a quieter, more introspective take on the action genre. There were no over-the-top stunts, no impossible splits, just a father, older and wiser, trying to make amends. The movie premiered in May and hit Netflix in December, earning praise for its emotional depth and restraint. For the first time in years, critics saw a Van Damme who had nothing left to prove. But just as it seemed he had finally found peace, a new scandal erupted. In April 2025, Romanian prosecutors accused Van Damme of being involved in a trafficking ring. The allegations were shocking. Witnesses claimed he had accepted trafficked women from a notorious crime boss at a hotel party in 2015. Van Damme's agent called the claims absurd, but the investigation cast a long shadow over his fragile comeback. The fallout was immediate. Projects were put on hold, sponsors pulled out, and the media pounced on every detail. For a man who had spent decades fighting to reclaim his reputation, it was a devastating blow. Yet, through it all, Jean-Claude Van Damme remained defiant. He continued to train, to speak openly about his struggles, and to reach out to fans who still believed in him. His story was no longer just about fame or fortune. It was about resilience, about the power to get back up no matter how many times life knocked him down. The world had seen him at his best and his worst, but the fight inside him had never truly ended. For those who had followed Jean-Claude Van Damme's journey from the beginning, the latest scandal felt like a cruel twist in a story already filled with heartbreak and redemption. The headlines were relentless, each one more sensational than the last. News outlets dissected every detail of the Romanian investigation, speculating about Van Damme's involvement and what it might mean for his already battered legacy. Social media exploded with opinions, some defending the action star, others quick to condemn. For Van Damme, it was a familiar storm, one he had weathered before, but never with stakes quite this high. The accusation struck at the core of everything he had worked to rebuild. For years, Van Damme had tried to distance himself from the chaos of his past, focusing on his health, his family, and his fans. He had spoken openly about his struggles with addiction and mental illness, hoping that honesty would help others find their own path to recovery. He had embraced humility, admitting to mistakes and making amends where he could. But in the court of public opinion, redemption is a fragile thing. One accusation, one rumor, can undo years of hard work in an instant. As the investigation unfolded, Van Damme's supporters pointed to his long history of charitable work and his efforts to raise awareness about mental health. They shared stories of his kindness, his generosity, and his willingness to help those in need. They remembered the boy from Brussels who had overcome bullying and poverty to become a global superstar, the man who had inspired millions with his discipline and determination. To them, the allegations seemed out of character, a desperate attempt to drag down a man who had already paid a heavy price for his past mistakes. But for others, the scandal was just another chapter in a long saga of self-destruction. They saw a pattern of reckless behavior, a man who had squandered his talent and betrayed the trust of those who believed in him. They pointed to the missed shoots, the broken contracts, the public meltdowns, and the endless parade of tabloid headlines. To them, Van Damme was a cautionary tale, a reminder that fame and fortune can't protect you from the consequences of your actions. Caught between these two worlds, Van Damme faced a choice. He could retreat into silence, letting the rumors define his legacy, or he could fight back, telling his story on his own terms. True to form, he chose the latter. In a series of interviews, he addressed the allegations head-on, denying any involvement in trafficking and expressing his outrage at the accusations. He spoke about the pain of being judged for things he hadn't done, the frustration of seeing his name dragged through the mud yet again. But he also acknowledged his past, admitting that his own mistakes had made him an easy target. The interviews were raw and emotional, a far cry from the polished image he had once projected. Van Damme didn't shy away from the hard questions. He talked about his years of addiction, the toll it had taken on his family, and the long road to recovery. He spoke about his bipolar disorder, the manic highs and crushing lows that had shaped his life. He admitted to moments of weakness, to times when he had let down the people who cared about him most. But he also spoke about hope, the belief that it's never too late to change, to make amends, to start over. For many fans, these moments of vulnerability were more powerful than any movie role. They saw a man who had been broken and rebuilt, who had faced his demons and survived. They saw someone who refused to be defined by his worst moments, who kept fighting even when the world seemed determined to count him out. In a culture obsessed with perfection, Van Damme's willingness to show his scars made him more relatable, more human. As the legal battle dragged on, Van Damme's future remained uncertain. The industry that had once celebrated him now watched from a distance, waiting to see how the story would end. But for Jean-Claude, the fight was no longer about fame or fortune. It was about dignity, about proving to himself and to the world that he was more than the sum of his mistakes. The career that had ended so suddenly was only part of his story. The rest was still being written, one day at a time. In the end, Jean-Claude Van Damme's story is not just about the movies he made or the scandals that threatened to erase his legacy. It's about the relentless pursuit of a dream, the cost of ambition, and the resilience of the human spirit. For every headline that declared his career over, there was a quiet moment of determination, a decision to get up, to keep fighting, to believe that redemption was possible even when the world had given up hope. As the dust settled from the latest scandal, Van Damme found himself at a crossroads. The industry that had once embraced him now seemed indifferent, content to let his name fade into the background of Hollywood history. But for Van Damme, obscurity was never an option. He had spent his entire life defying expectations, proving doubters wrong, and pushing his body and mind to their absolute limits. The same stubbornness that had fueled his rise to stardom now became his greatest asset in the fight for a second chance. That he returned to the basics, focusing on the things that had always given him strength: discipline, training, and connection with his fans. He doubled down on his YouTube channel, sharing not just workout routines, but also stories from his life, lessons learned, regrets, and moments of unexpected joy. He spoke candidly about his struggles with mental health, hoping to break the stigma and encourage others to seek help. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from around the world, from people who had been inspired by his honesty and resilience. For the first time in years, Van Damme felt a sense of purpose that went beyond the silver screen. He also reconnected with his family, making amends for the years lost to addiction and fame. His children, once distant, began to see him not just as a movie star, but as a father who was trying, imperfectly, but sincerely, to make things right. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but it was real. In private moments, away from the cameras and the crowds, Van Damme found a peace that had eluded him for decades. Professionally, he accepted that the era of blockbuster action roles was behind him. But that didn't mean his creative journey was over. He began to explore new projects, independent films, documentaries, and collaborations with up-and-coming filmmakers who had grown up idolizing his work. He mentored young martial artists, passing on the lessons of discipline and perseverance that had shaped his own life. In these smaller, quieter moments, Van Damme discovered a new kind of fulfillment, one that wasn't measured in box office receipts or magazine covers, but in the impact he could have on the next generation. The world, too, began to see him differently. The narrative shifted from scandal to survival, from downfall to endurance. Critics who had once dismissed him as a relic of a bygone era now praised his willingness to evolve, to confront his past, and to use his platform for good. Documentaries and retrospectives explored the full arc of his life, from bullied child to global superstar to cautionary tale, and finally, to survivor. The story of Jean-Claude Van Damme became a testament to the power of second chances, a reminder that even the most spectacular falls can be followed by unexpected rises. As for the allegations that had threatened to end his career once and for all, the truth eventually emerged. The investigation concluded with no charges filed against Van Damme. The headlines faded, replaced by stories of his ongoing recovery and his efforts to give back. The experience left scars, but it also brought clarity. Van Damme realized that his worth was not defined by the roles he played or the money he earned, but by the lives he touched and the example he set. In interviews, he often reflected on the journey, the highs and lows, the victories and defeats. He spoke about the importance of forgiveness, both for others and for oneself. He acknowledged the pain he had caused, but also the growth that had come from facing his darkest moments. For Van Damme, the end of his career was not a tragedy, but a turning point, a chance to rewrite his story on his own terms. And so, the Muscles from Brussels continues to move forward, one day at a time. His legacy is no longer just about action movies or martial arts, but about resilience, honesty, and the courage to keep fighting when the world says you're finished. Jean-Claude Van Damme's career may have ended in the way Hollywood measures success, but his story is far from over. In the hearts of those he's inspired, the fight goes on.